We're heading out to Hacklebarney State Park. Gonna meet Dana out there. She's got a couple spots where she's found some Native American paranormal activity, and we're hoping to maybe find the Hacklebarney gnome. So here we go. All right, I just got here. There's a bunch of plaques and stuff. I'll show you guys. I'm gonna drive in. You can see, oops, that's my finger. We're gonna be heading in, and yeah, see what happens. How you doing, Dana?
Hi.
Yeah, yeah.
Got it?
Now we got you.
I love your background.
This is my home studio.
Cool.
This is the one I use the most. So how you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I'm so excited to unpack our experience the other night.
Definitely. Let's just jump right into it. So I'll let you start because you're obviously the medium here. So tell us what you experienced when we got there.
Awesome. So, always walking into Hacklebarney State Park, you can sort of I always feel like there's a certain point when you walk into Hacklebarney State Park, you walk down the steps, remember those stone steps?
Yes.
And then you continue walking toward the Black River, and all of a sudden it's like there's a thickness of spiritual energy that always like slaps me right in the face in there. And so many people have reported spiritual activity, hauntings, random sightings, and just feelings, things captured in photography. So it's a super fascinating place with a ton of history. So always walking in, there's that anticipation, which I felt. And we were there just as the sun was setting, which is such a cool time to be there because the people start leaving and the park really starts to come alive with that spiritual energy.
Definitely.
And I think we all felt that, as
We did. I
walked.
actually got on camera the one part where you kind of warned us that like there's that wall of energy. And I actually filmed as we walked through, and I definitely felt it. I didn't ask the guys on the camera, but I definitely felt it.
Yeah, and to me, I don't know, is it like Narnia? It's just like so strange. It's like, stepping
Yes.
into this other like fantasy world to me. I mean, I'm such a nut, but for me as someone who's so sensitive to energy, like I sense this difference, and it's practically every time I go there. So if I go there to just be quiet and think, I actually don't go into the park that deep.
Gotcha.
I just kind of sit towards the entrance more, to be honest. But so once we got in there, I saw the tree, which I had my own spiritual experience with years ago. And we were around there, and we continued walking a little bit until we found that space that we felt drawn to. And I particularly felt so drawn to this space. It sort of really did look like a little altar in the middle of the Black River. And it's a beautiful spot to go during the day for picnicking, but right there at night as the sun was setting, again, you're not supposed to be there after dusk, but we were kind of pushing it now. I
could still see sunlight.
It was like I was just glued to that space.
Yeah.
I knew there was spiritual energy happening there, and I couldn't leave that space. So that's, I think, kind of why we ended up in that little altar area, and then it just went from there.
Right. Before we jump into where we went from there, you mentioned you had an experience at hair in my mouth. You mentioned you had an experience at the tree there that you recognized. Why don't you share and tell us what happened there?
Sure thing. So I grew up in very close to Hacklebarney State Park. And when I was a teenager, now, like we've talked about this before, and I've been doing mediumship since like forever. So even as a teenager, I was dating someone who loved to take me to weird New Jerseys and like see if I could guess what had happened there. It was like a thing he did with me.
That's cool.
So we were always going to like freaky places, and it was a ton of fun, in sort of a morbid way. But he really wanted to take me to Hacklebarney State Park, and I couldn't understand why, because I had been there during the day. To me, it's a beautiful place during the day to go for a hike,
it was
take
beautiful.
photos. and I never thought much more of it. But when we went at night together, at the time we were smoking cigarettes. I had a different cigarette than him. I had like a Marlboro Red. He had maybe a Newport, whatever it was. And we're walking in, having fun. And yeah, we sort of wanted to see if it was haunted,
Sure.
but we were also just teenagers like that wanted to go make out somewhere, you know?
Sure.
So we walk into the woods and we get down the stairs and we make a right and we're going into the park, and it is pitch black at this point. And there are picnic tables on the right side of the path.
Okay.
And so I remember we just sort of like threw our cigarettes on the ground, and it was a dry summer night. And we were just like having fun and talking and laughing. And all of a sudden, this force, there's no other way to describe it. It was just like this force came and appeared to us, to both of us. We both saw it. We were both affected by it. And it appeared right at the base of this tree that I pointed out. And it was like about the height of my hips. And it was thick. It was a little bit wider at the base than the actual trunk of the tree. But it was the shape of a triangle, like a lumpy triangle. And it was a void. So it didn't look like, it had no features. It was just a void. It was like blacker than black.
Sure.
And I still get chills when I think about it, because I've had many experiences with spiritual entities that are even non-human, but this was very different. And it was beyond me. At that point, I'd never seen anything like it in my life. And he saw it as well. He took his phone out to shine his flashlight on it, but we were both so startled just by the energy of it. Like, we stopped what we were doing and turned over just to look at this thing that had appeared. And anyway, when he took his phone out to shine his flashlight on it, this voided creature just became, it's like its power just multiplied by like 100. It was almost as if a bear was charging at us. And it wasn't a bear, but at the same time, we both just like started sprinting out and we left the park. And it left us with such a feeling that it was like one of those nights I didn't even sleep. I mean, I couldn't figure out what this was. I was totally intrigued and fascinated by it. And so the next morning, as soon as the sun rose, I went back to the park just to see, just to make sure there was nothing there. Like, it wasn't a garbage bag, or it wasn't, we didn't just invent this. We were not on drugs. We weren't drinking. What was this thing? And as I approached the tree, I saw in the bark of the tree, and I was the first person there that morning because it was right as the sun came up. In the bark of the tree was my Marlboro Red cigarette and his Newport cigarette right next to one another. And I looked at the ground, and they were not on the ground anymore. And at that moment, I knew that was a protective nature spirit.
Sure.
And it was a dry summer night, and I've never left, and I don't smoke anymore, luckily, but I've never since that point left a cigarette on the ground, especially in a wooded area. So that experience, it still gives me chills. I went to a expert, his name's Eric Lee. He lives in New Hope, and he owns Mystical Times. He's like a genius with all of this stuff. Like, if I was ever in a weird spiritual conundrum, he was a great mentor for me. And he explained to me that is very much in nature elemental spirit, and that was the spirit of a gnome. So he describes it as, you could classify it as a gnome. So that's the gnome of Hacklebarney State Park.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, we got to go back. I didn't get to see the gnome or the void, but we weren't focusing on that.
Right. Well, there's so much else there.
I know.
So Eric Lee described it to me that pretty much because there already was such spiritual energy about the park, many groups from, pagan groups, Wiccan groups, demonologists, all different range of spiritual people. Buddhist, everyone comes to the park, but at nighttime, specific groups come to the park to have rituals, to conjure, to do these types of things. Right. And I met a police officer from Chester in I think it was about 2010. So about a little over 10 years ago, and he had to patrol that area every single night because these groups were coming from all over the place.
Wow.
So I believe that these groups that were real humans, coming in physically into the park, amplifying that spiritual energy. I mean, forget it. This park is filled with it. I mean, it's everywhere. So that's why it was, and I mean, we had an experience right away.
Yeah. I was gonna say, why don't we pick up? So we were on the little altar area, and I was taking some footage, and I noticed you just kept kind of like focusing on one little area. I saw you pull your phone out. So why don't you go ahead and tell us what happened there?
Sure thing. So right there on that altar area, it's sort of like this concrete, slab with stones around it in the middle of the Black River.
Right.
And we had entered on one side, and all of a sudden I was getting pulled toward the other side. And I can't describe it in any other way than I felt like there were a few people hanging out, not in physical form, in spiritual form, saying, hey, come over here, come on, follow, like, check this out. I had already let my spiritual self communicate there that I wanted to, touch base with anyone if anyone wants to come through, or so I knew that they were coming because they knew we were there, and they were willing to sort of show us and welcome us into into a section of the woods.
Yeah.
I have to go see Haley when we're done here. So I took out my phone because when I have this type of hunch, especially if it's at night, I like to just see if I can capture anything on my iPhone. You can simply use a flashlight, like anyone can try this at home, but you'll see the natural pattern of a bug, for example, and then you'll notice definitely it's 100% different if it's an orb. Ghost orb. And the way the orb is coming to you, sometimes they go away from the camera if you like just walk into a room, but if you're trying to communicate and there's something there, they're like coming toward you, like directly at you. And so I saw them and I was like, okay, I know for sure we're here and they're here and they want us to follow them. So at that point, we took that very adventurous walk against the wooden plank.
Yeah, next time prepare me for like
a ballerina on
it
that
wasn't
plank.
just going to be a walk. It wasn't just going to be a walk in the woods. It was a hike over a little, I don't know, like 12-inch maybe piece of, I thought it was a 2x4, but it was actually like a tree shaved in half because of the uneven spots. And you went flying over it like a fairy, but I weigh a little bit more and the thing was going like up and down as I was stepping.
Well, thank God our angels were there protecting us, because
I almost lost it at once. I don't know if you saw. I was like, what? And somebody pushed me back. I went, oh, thanks. It was bad.
Yeah, so I was just over here and was feeling a little bit more drawn towards this side to come this way.
Okay.
And I turned on my camera and saw like 3 different orbs coming and going this way. So I feel like I want to follow them.
So she wants to go up into that area, and now I have to walk over this, so here we go.
Well, once we got over that, it was like that spiritual energy I felt amplified even further. And so I knew, and then it was almost as if they were pulling my arm, like come this way. And so I just kept walking. I don't know if you remember, but I was just kind of like, okay, like let's keep going a little bit.
Yeah,
and I was sort of randomly, but then I just stopped at this one space.
Did you hear that? We're walking in the woods right now. Dana feels a spirit up in this area, so we're going to try to tune in.
And the reason why I think we're up here is because I think the Lenape Native Americans, this is a place where you could see everything, where you can look at the Black River. So I was led to come up here, and I feel honored to be up here. I think we all should,
I definitely feel it.
because you feel, I
It's like a
believe it's a
light,
man.
is it?
Yeah.
I almost felt like I was standing here proud and like looking over my land to make sure like we were
Yeah.
all safe. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's a welcoming. And I don't know what the significance of that space was. And maybe if we investigated it further, we would have been able to figure it out, with the help from our spirit friends. But at that point, when we all made it over there and the cameras were going and we were there, I mean, you could see this orb activity on camera. It picked up like crazy. And you could see them rushing toward us. And it felt so loving for me, which is such a better feeling than my major, gnome experience from years ago. But it really was, I felt very honored by it. And I felt like someone who, like, the Black River was very meaningful to whoever brought us up to this point, because it was like we were looking over the river, and it was just such a sacred moment. Right. So that leads me to think it was, maybe spirits of the Lenape Native Americans that we connected with.
If you remember, when you got to that area and started to feel like that better energy, I was shaking because I don't get to talk to this. I feel things. So that increase in activity and all the orbs was rushing through me like, wow, and I was shaking. And then it kind of calmed. And if you remember, I turned to you and I said, now all of a sudden I'm getting a sense of like being proud. Like I was like standing with my chest up, like overlooking, like, yes, like this is mine.
You were.
Yes.
You were. And I remember when it was like right where we got there. I think it was like right before I said, okay, this is the spot. You were like, I'm shaking, like my body is shaking.
That's what
and that's definitely, there was so much spiritual activity there. It wasn't just like one soul that came by and put chills on our body. It was like from all angles, in and out. I mean, the community.
Yeah.
And it was, it was wonderful. And when we were up there, and I even left a crystal of gratitude, because it was such a lovely experience to be.
All right, so you're gonna put this crystal down there?
All right, so I'm just gonna leave this crystal as a sign of gratitude. Thank you for showing us to come up here.
It sounded almost like somebody walked away when she put the crystal down.
I know this is terror talk, but it was like, oh my gosh, this was so beautiful.
We cover everything.
We did.
It was definitely, it was welcoming almost.
Yes.
Actually since we got back, I've actually been feeling a pull to go back, almost like we have a little unfinished business.
I do.
Yeah, so we're gonna have to get back there and see what that's about, because it's been like just constant. And I haven't said anything to you yet, so yeah.
I feel the same exact way. And to me, I did feel like that was almost like a bit of a spiritual initiation. That's really how I felt about that moment, was like, we went there, we let them know that we're here to respectfully explore this area in a spiritual way.
Exactly.
And we got welcomed in.
You probably don't know, unless someone else has told you. When you're talking to me, like when we're out there in the woods, we were talking, you feel like an energy. When you start to connect with over there, you kind of like, it's like you drop off. So that'll catch my attention. Like I was like doing this, and all of a sudden your energy is kind of like whoops, and I look and you're focused on something. So that's I don't know how you interpret that with somebody like myself, but it's noticeable.
See, it's weird because I don't notice when I'm doing it, and because I'm in a different dimension at that point.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
And when I give readings, especially when they're more mediumship readings, I really do have to, I guess I just kind of go into the zone with it. And so like, if you're looking at me like, hey, are you in there? Because it's kind of like,
it's not even a look. It's almost like the energy that you give off kind of just stops.
Okay.
So I feel like, imagine a bunch of tuning forks. So when I'm out, everybody has a different one, and I feel them all the time. So I know where everybody is. I feel people, and it's like somebody grabs it and holds on. Like and I guess that's because your energy is shifting to the other dimension.
It is.
So so your energy here just kind of like, you're still there. I mean, look, you're still talking, but it's like your tuning fork just got held and you're not vibrating anymore.
That's incredible that you can sense that type of thing, because
Yeah.
that's exactly what happens during mediumship, is that your literal brain waves change, and also your energy levels drop completely. So when someone who doesn't maybe have like a natural ability, for example, for psychic ability, but they really want to work on developing this, they practice meditation intensely, because they have to work on getting their energy level down, to a point where you can communicate and hear and just, I guess, operate on that level. And so that's really funny that you noticed that, because not many people would notice it to that level, but you are so intuitive yourself and empathic. So that's very
The
cool.
meditation that you're talking about, I actually do. I use something I mentioned to you, Hape, which helps with the meditating. And
Yes.
I get my breath. It's usually about 1 breath a minute. My heart rate's probably, under 50. And that allows everything to just stop and be calm. I've always described it to people as, I don't know how people see their brain, but it's just constant like stuff going on. And when I meditate, it's almost like an open auditorium, and I'm just there, and it's like, wow. And then I can go wherever. And usually the auditorium fades away, and then I start to get visions of whatever wants to come through at that time.
That's excellent. And it's such a good practice, especially working with paranormal, because that's where your veil to the spiritual world is. And it's thinning. Yours is definitely thinning out. And that the more you become comfortable with that state of mind, the more that veil thins. And the more it's like, you forget that it's a different dimension when you're in it. You're just doing it feels so natural.
Right. Yeah, I think I'm still kind of holding on to that last little piece.
Yeah.
Just for my sanity. I'm sure it'll go someday, but
I'm just gonna rip it off.
I'm sure you will. Like a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
Oh boy. So overall, did you have a good experience on this one, or how did you like it?
Absolutely. I mean, I didn't know what to like. It really reminded me of that time in my life when I was doing the Weird New Jersey. It was almost like he was testing me, which it's fine.
Hey.
I'll do it.
Sure.
I believe in myself. I'll do it.
Sure.
And I had so much fun during that time in my life. I had so much fun. It really was a time when I learned that, wow, I can go to a place and feel some type of trauma that's happened here, or every experience is so different. Right. So it was actually really cool to go to Hacklebarney with the intention, because now at this point in my life, normally people come to me or spirits come to me.
Sure.
I'm not normally going and seeking it out. So this going out, I didn't know how it would be or what would happen. And to know that it was a really good experience. We got a lot of spiritual activity, especially that moment. And I know you have the clip of this, when that orb just like flies by in the camera crew, and there are like just 3 orbs. It's like boom, boom, boom. Like they're all coming up, like literally leading us up to that place. I mean, that was such a honestly like spiritually supportive experience.
Sure.
And to do that with you was super cool. So if they didn't like our energy together as a group or individually, they wouldn't have shown themselves, and they did. And so that's quickly, a really cool thing.
Yeah. It was almost like they're here.
Yes.
Yeah, it was great. Well, we do have a couple more things planned, and I appreciate your time on both the investigation and this podcast. Viewers, you're going to be seeing a lot more of her, so stay tuned. And